Hello, everybody. We're going to start off with an Algebra 2 concept called completing the square today. This is going to provide a little bit of foundational understanding for us and what we're going to do for the rest of the school year, which is we are going to look at the generic form of one of our conics, whether it's a circle, ellipse, hyperbola, parabola, and then we're going to use completing the square in order to rewrite that in a familiar form, which is what we've been calling our standard form. Okay. So just to look at some patterns here, what we're doing by completing the square is essentially factoring, and it's a quick way of factoring to write what's called a perfect square. And what I mean by perfect square is, and we're all familiar with squares, is that squares have four equal sides. And those sides could be anything. In this case, maybe it's x plus 7 and x plus 7, generically. So what we want to do is we want to be able to find out what's in those boxes, the areas, okay? In order to do that, you have to multiply the lengths to get each one of the areas. But then if you don't have one of those terms and you know the insides, going backwards, that's called completing the square. So looking at multiplying these two binomials out, you would, some people say FOIL, some people say distribution. You would have x squared as your first term. Your last term, you're going to have 49, so plus 49. Then you're going to have to multiply both the inside terms and the outside terms. And that's going to give you two more values. Well, both of those are going to be 7x. So you will end up with x squared plus 14x plus 49. Now notice that anytime you have two of the exact same binomials, x plus 7 and x plus 7, the middle two terms are going to be exactly the same. So really what you can do is multiply just one of them together and double it. Okay? So quickly doing this next one, I know my first term has to be x squared. I know my last term has to be negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. Basically, you're just squaring the negative 3, just like you were just squaring 7 to get 49, because that is 7 times 7. It's a square. So I know it's plus 9. Now the inside terms are going to be negative 3x and another negative 3x. So it's twice that. So it's minus 6x. Okay. So now getting at completing the square, we're going to use those top two examples to try to figure out what number we could put in the blank in order to write this as a perfect square binomial. So that's often written as x plus 3 squared, or in this case, x plus 7 squared. That's a perfect square binomial. So how would we get that? Well, in the first example, how does 14 come from these two numbers? Well, 14 is twice that number. And if you look at negative 6, you can look at these numbers, or you can write, oh, I made a little mistake here. This is not x plus 3. This is x minus 3. Okay. So you can look at the minus 3 here, just like you could look at the plus 7 above. And that middle term is always going to be double. So going backwards, if you're trying to find out, if you're given this trinomial, 3 terms, looking at that middle term, you can take half of that and get that value. So I know that this is going to be, take 8 and divide it by 2. That's going to give me 4. So I know this is going to have to be a plus 4. And it has to be squared. Well, if I have this, then what's going to be the term that I'm looking for? Well, I know it's going to have to come from squaring 4. So it has to be 16. Because if I were to write this out, x plus 4 times x plus 4, I know I'm getting my first term my last term, that's where it comes from, 4 times 4, right? So I'm squaring 4. Looking at one more example. If I learn how to use my technology, there we go. All right, now I want to write this as a perfect square as well. So I know that my first term here has to be x, and I look at the negative 10, divide that by 2, and that's going to give me negative 5. What happens when I square negative 5? I should get positive 25. Okay, so that's completing the square. I'm attaching a separate assignment that is just practicing completing the square. And I'm going to make another video coming up, and that's going to be using completing the square to write the standard form of the circle, and then a separate video to use completing the square to find the standard form of an ellipse.